Okay, so here's how to play Lucian in Season 14. Lucian is a very interesting pick right now. He does not really take advantage of any of the new items, but nonetheless he brings a lot to the table in the current bot lane environment. The meta is shifting more and more towards junglers contesting void grabs, which allows Lucian to dominate the lane in the 2v2 with his enormous early game power. But even if the junglers choose to camp bot lane, trying to get to you through the new gank paths, Lucian is still excellent. Not only can you stand your ground most of the time since your burst damage is so high, but Lucian is also one of the few marksmen with a mobility spell. A spell you definitely need to master if you want to play Lucian to his full potential. A lot of your decision making will come down to using your E, as you will see in this video. This even comes down to Lucian's rune and item choices, which are carefully tailored around quick, bursty trades that are enabled by your dash. There are different approaches to Lucian as well, of course, trying to truly maximize his burst damage, but these are generally speaking inferior to the build I will show you. And because his E is so intricate, I would label Lucian as a champion that is easy to learn but hard to master. And if you are a Lucian player who already has experience on the champion, first of all, hi, how are you doing? But second, I would assume that you watch this video because you're unhappy with your performance and want to improve, maybe you're even hard stuck and don't know what to do. Since League is a multifaceted game, it is of course impossible for me to tell you exactly where the problem is for you in particular. But this is why I recommend private coaching lessons for anyone who is serious about improving their rank. With my sponsor Solo Queue Solution, you can book private coaching with an experienced challenger coach who can tell you exactly what you need to do to climb from low elo to high elo. In hand-tailored lessons specifically designed for you, your coach will give you all the tools you need to hone your skills. Because at the end of the day, League of Legends is just that, a skill, and any skill can be taught and learned. Of course, this coaching service is nothing for casual players. It is a very time-intensive course, since you also need to play plenty of solo queue in your free time in order to implement what you learn during the lessons. But for those of you who would say League of Legends is your main hobby, the coaching from Solo Queue Solution might be exactly what you need to start climbing again. More information and a link where you can book your first session right away are in the description. And with that being said, here's the rune page I recommend for Lucian 100% of the time. You go for Press the Attack, Presence of Mind, Legend Bloodline and Coup de Grace, with Magical Footwear and Biscuit Delivery secondary. Lucian is an early game bully. His early game burst damage is excellent and he needs to take advantage of that, and luckily Press the Attack is the perfect rune to complement him. It is super easy to trigger because of Lucian's passive. All you need to do is auto once, cast a spell, and then auto again with your passive, and the rune is procced. It is by far the best keystone on him, and there is not even an alternative you could consider. Press the Attack 100% of the time. Now the second rune is Presence of Mind, and this is also quite important with not really any alternatives. As I've said, Lucian's dash is the most important spell for you, and you always need to have enough mana to cast the spell, in addition to all your other spells. Lucian's passive is crucial. It's a lot of your damage output, and Presence of Mind allows you to cycle through your spells throughout the entire fight, no matter how long it takes, and it literally translates to damage, and Lucian is all about dealing damage. He's not a utility marksman, you need to gun down the first target and keep going, and Presence of Mind is the perfect rune here. And as you know, Lucian as a spellslinger does not really need attack speed too much. It's still a good stat on him, don't get me wrong, but Legend Bloodline has much more upside overall. On Lucian you typically want to cast a spell, then auto, then cast a spell, and so on and so forth, just alternating between autos and spells, so, Legend Alacrity would be a little bit more damage in the early game, yes, but Legend Bloodline also frees up your item choices, allowing you to skip lifesteal, and you need specific items to scale in the mid and late game, so easy inclusion. Coup de Grace is another rune perfect for early game champions. Well, it's a cookie cutter rune, most champions take it if they don't have special synergies with something else, but if you want early game trades and early damage, Coup de Grace is the best rune still, and Lucian doesn't really want any of the others. Even in tank matchups, Cut Down is not really the rune for him, because it just costs him so much in the early game. You want that early power. Now for the secondary runes, Magical Footwear and Biscuit Delivery are quite common choices on many AD carries, but on Lucian in particular the runes are very synergistic. Magical Footwear is always great because you save 300 gold on the boots purchase, allowing you to get your item 300 gold faster. The downside of this rune is of course that you cannot buy boots early, which for some marksmen is a real big deal. Lucian, however, doesn't really mind. He doesn't need the boot upgrade early, it's not really that big of a power increase for him, and also the movement speed is not really a factor because you have your dash. Lucian's dash is very powerful, never forget that. And speaking of Lucian's dash, this is also where you want Biscuit Delivery. Not really his dash only, all of his spells are very important during the early game because they unlock your burst damage, and Biscuit Delivery is the perfect rune for early game mana. In any case, most people agree on the optimal runes on Lucian, but when it comes to the item build, there are split opinions, but Trust me, the build I will show you is the best, but let's first talk about the bait build. Bait not in the sense of that it would be good for baiting enemies, no, it's bait for you. If you take it, you got baited and you are playing with an inferior build. The bait core I'm talking about is of course Stormrazor plus Voltaic Cyclosword. Quite a few Lucian players pick these items because they are, at a first glance, very synergistic with your playstyle. They provide huge burst damage with their Energizer procs, allowing you to gun down the first target very quickly, which means any squishy who is out of position gets instantly deleted. Sounds quite nice, but it only really works in games where you are winning anyway. With this build, you have to snowball in order to do anything, and if you fall behind just a little bit, you're completely useless in the mid and late game. In the very late game it will get a little bit better, but for the most part you will be out of the game and you need to hope that your team's good enough to carry you. No, instead the best build is as follows. The first item should be Kraken Slayer, then you upgrade your boots to either Lucidity Boots or Berserker's Greaves, it's personal preference really, then Navori Quick Blades, and for the late game, Rapid Fire Cannon, the last Whisper item of Lord Dominic's Regards or Motor Reminder depending on the matchup, and for your last item you can take Guardian Angel, or if you're not really concerned with bursty assassins, especially AD assassins, Bloodthirster is also a noteworthy alternative. And this build really does everything for Lucian and is very synergistic with his kit and his playstyle in general. Kraken Slayer is, just like Stormrazor, a Noonquiver item which makes for a strong lane phase because Noonquiver is one of the strongest components a marksman can buy. And while it looks more like an item for champions who want extended fights, it is perfect on Lucian because of his passive. Just like Press the Attack, the passive helps Lucian with a double shot to trigger Kraken Slayer over and over when you start weaving spells between your auto attacks. It still increases your initial burst damage, but unlike the Stormrazor Cyclosword build, it will keep going if the fight keeps going. It's just pure upside, best first item you can buy. Now the boots choice doesn't really matter, Berserker's Greaves is a little better synergistic with Kraken Slayer, but Lucidity Boots are cheaper and help you weave your spells more, give you more uptime on E. I personally would say Lucidity Boots are better, but it's personal preference. Now Navori Quick Blades rounds out your core perfectly. You trigger it over and over with your double shots, reducing your cooldowns, crucially reducing the cooldown of your E even further, giving you more dashes in the fight. With Kraken Slayer and Quick Blades alone, Lucian can do a lot, even in teamfights, even in games where he is a little bit behind, whereas with Stormrazor Cyclosword you can't do nothing if you're behind. But we'll get to that during the analysis part. Now Rapid Fire Cannon is also nice because it's playing into this burst damage trading pattern that Lucian has while also fixing your attack range to some degree, so it's a very good inclusion. In the late game you naturally need a Last Whisper item because even if the enemy doesn't have tanks, base armor is very high in the late game, so Lord Doms or Motor Reminder depending on the matchup, but a Last Whisper item is mandatory for any AD carry, so this shouldn't come as a surprise. Last item also fairly standard, Guardian Angel or Bloodthirster, a semi-defensive item. Bloodthirster of course a little bit more damage, but the revive passive on Guardian Angel can in some matchups be a game changer. Anyway, now that we're all on the same page, and you hopefully don't fall for the bait core of Stormrazor plus Cyclosword, let's go into the analysis. Lucian's early game is extremely strong. Usually marksmen with below average attack range tend to suffer in lane, but Lucian's high burst damage in combination with his dash for a gap closer more than makes up for that. You can punish the enemy extremely hard when they overstep, so finding and taking advantage of such openings is key when learning this champion. This early game dominance also makes your lane very attractive for your jungler, but in this exchange right here, the enemy jungler is able to defuse the situation. However, as you see, Lucian's dash is also a great defensive tool, allowing him to quickly get back to safety if he has to. In any case, especially when you and your support are on the same page, you should look for aggressive early trades as often as possible. Even in this situation here, where you normally need to take minion aggro into account, Lucian gets in and out so quickly that, with Melio's help, the trade is still quite favorable. Minion aggro is only really a factor in longer exchanges, so Lucian's burst damage with Press the Attack is even more valuable here. As a consequence though, as you can probably tell, what you can or cannot do when playing Lucian greatly depends on how well your support is playing. With a good support player by your side, Lucian can take the wildest trades and still come out ahead. Of course, some of you might think now that this would be a terrible trait for solo queue really, since you cannot rely on the quality of your supports here. However, this is merely another aspect of Lucian's skill expression. Gauging the prowess of your support and choosing your fights accordingly is important, and there will be favorable opportunities for you no matter what. Just finding them gets easier the better your support is. And this trap right here is a prime example. Lucian can burst down a face-checking Sona no matter what Melio might do right now, And yes, his help allows Lucian to also trade with Zeri afterwards, but with an AFK support, for example, the trap on Sona would still have worked, and it is your job to take advantage of this. So, your rule of thumb is, the more help you get from your allies, the more aggressively you should play. Look at Lucian's positioning after seeing that Evelynn wants to set up a gank. Most ADCs have to be reactive, wait until their team finds the engage, and only then follow up. Lucian, however, can actually frontline with his high burst, as long as you don't run headfirst into big crowd control spells, of course. Now, in mid and late game teamfights, Lucian's short range is more of a liability, because it is easier for the enemy to punish you when they are grouped. However, when everything went according to plan during the lane phase, like in this example, you'll be far enough ahead with items that fighting will still be easy. Therefore, we'll jump to a different replay for the team fighting section, since you still need to find ways to be useful in the mid and late game should you get outplayed during the lane phase. And all you need to know about the early game in this one, let's just say it didn't go too well for Lucian. Also, Lucian doesn't really contribute anything besides damage. He is no Ashe or Varus who can always impact fights with crowd control. But fortunately, you don't need to be particularly fed to deal damage in a meaningful way. All Lucian realistically needs is his 2-item combo of Kraken Slayer and Navori Quickblades, and this is also why I recommend this build over the Energizer core. With Kraken Quickblades, you'll always be useful, whereas Stormrazor and Cycle Sword are only good when snowballing and useless otherwise, which makes for an inconsistent performance. With Kraken Quickblades though, you'll crucially have more access to your dash, which is your #1 way to compensate for your range. Dash usage is key here, as you can see. It makes it very difficult for the enemy to punish your seemingly punishable positioning, since you can just adjust in a blink of an eye. So you can just safely wait it out until the initial engage is over before rejoining to gun down the front line with that sweet Kraken Slayer damage. And this is also what sets Lucian apart from other ADCs with mobility spells. When Ezreal, for example, uses his jump, he'll be quite vulnerable for a rather long time during the mid and late game. Quickblades Lucian, on the other hand, has plenty of access to this tool, creating not only a viable safety net for you, but also opportunities for outplays. A Lucian player who's not maximizing the value from Lucian's E will have a hard time during fights, suffering from lack of range. But when you use your dash when it makes sense, while also refreshing its cooldown again and again, your options in teamfights are endless. All of this might look easy when watching a seasoned player, but make no mistake, team fighting with Lucian is a skill difficult to master. However, it will be much easier for you if you manage to make the most of Lucian's incredible lane phase, and I can help you with that thanks to my AD Carry lane phase guide, which should be clickable on your screen right there.